Japan's largest women's prison. Most of the people shuffling down the hallway have gray hair. Some lean on canes, some push walkers. But this isn't a nursing home. For some of the women here, this place is a better option than the outside world. Some say they'd pay a small monthly fee just to live here for the rest of their lives. Why would prison beat freedom? The number of inmates over 65 has nearly quadrupled between 2003 and 2022. Most are here for theft, often something as small as groceries. It's not just about money. In a 2017 survey, more than half of the seniors caught shoplifting lived alone. 40% said they had no family or barely spoke to the ones they had. Inside, there are regular meals, medical care, and people who actually talk to you, things some of them couldn't find outside. This episode isn't about blaming any country or any individual. It's about a structural shift happening inside aging societies everywhere. Across the Pacific, an 84-year-old woman opens her car door every morning. Her workplace isn't a hospital lobby anymore. It's a rideshare app. She's one of roughly 11 million Americans over 65 still in the labor force, 1 in 5. An old woman choosing prison, an old woman behind a steering wheel. Different countries, different reasons it seems. But they start from the same question. Retirement wasn't supposed to look like this. In 1935, the United States passed the Social Security Act. Turn 65, and the government promises to take care of the rest of your life. That number didn't stay in America. 65 became the export standard for pension systems worldwide. Back then, 65 was close to the finish line. Life expectancy was far shorter. Retirement wasn't a failure, it was the reward. The next stage a nation designed for you after a lifetime of work. That promise still exists, on paper. But the numbers tell a different story. The average age Americans first file for Social Security climbed from 63.8 in 1998 to 65 in 2023. Retirement hasn't disappeared, it's just been pushed back year after year. In Wisconsin, 83-year-old Thomas Magnuson has been driving a yard truck at a Walmart facility since 1999. This wasn't in his retirement plan. Why is this happening? In 1978, the US introduced the 401k, a law that shifted pensions from something companies handled to something individuals had to manage themselves. The premise was simple: give people a little financial literacy and they'd figure it out. No policymaker has admitted that experiment failed. In a recent survey, 46% of Americans said they have $0 in a retirement account. The risk moved from the government to companies and finally onto individual shoulders. But here's the thing, America wasn't first. In 1981, a country in South America tried a far more radical version, Chile. Under a military dictatorship, economists trained at the University of Chicago privatized the entire national pension system. Instead of the state or a company, each worker hands over 10% of their paycheck to a private fund. That account becomes their entire retirement. The promise? 70% of your final salary. What people actually got? 20 to 30% on average. 4 out of 5 retirees ended up with a pension below minimum wage. In 2016, the streets of Santiago filled with protesters. Buses were set on fire. The following year, organizers claim more than 2 million people joined marches across the country. The idea that individuals should handle their own retirement, Chile ran that experiment first, 45 years ago. What America shows is a promise sliding backward. Across the Pacific, Japan is solving the same problem a different way. 94% of Japanese companies still fix the retirement age at 60, but of those, 70% rehire the same employee right after, under a new contract at a lower wage. Retirement becomes a ritual. What actually continues is the same seat, the same person, less pay. It's not a choice, it's arithmetic. In 2021, Japan became the first country in the world where the ratio dropped below 2 working-age people for every senior citizen, the highest such burden on Earth. Which brings us back to where we started. Some of these seniors choosing prison come from the same root cause. The retirement system and nation design simply never caught up with how many people got left alone. Across the sea, South Korea. Close by, but a completely different face. About 40% of people over 65 live in relative poverty, the highest rate in the OECD, nearly 3 times the average. Among those over 75, it's more than half. A recent academic study broke down the gap. If Korea had Germany's pension structure, that poverty rate would fall from 52% to under 6%. The national pensions income replacement rate sits well below the OECD average. The result? More than 57% of Koreans aged 65 to 79 say they plan to keep working. More than half give the same reason: basic living expenses. If Japan kept the form and changed the name, Korea's system was simply never enough to begin with. Not every country accepted this quietly. In 2023, France raised its minimum legal retirement age from 62 to 64. 2 years, that's all. The streets filled with protesters immediately. Some clashes turned violent. China is breaking this promise a different way. In 2024, for the first time since the 1950s, it raised the statutory retirement age. But at the same time, something opposite was happening in the hiring market: 35. In China's job market, that number is a cliff. Research analyzing real hiring data found that once a worker crosses 35, their odds of being laid off jump more than 35% compared to before. Roughly 1 in 5 job listings explicitly caps the age, and 35 is the most common ceiling. The state says work longer. The market says you're already too old at 35. Somewhere in between, there are people falling through. Africa shows yet another face of the same betrayal. Nigeria's constitution explicitly guarantees pension rights. The problem isn't the law, it's the system that's supposed to enforce it. Retirees wait an average of 12 to 15 years to receive their gratuity payments. Many die before it ever arrives. Since 2015, military veterans have been blocking roads in protest. Decades of service, followed by poverty. America shifted the risk onto individuals. Chile ran that experiment first, and harder. Japan erased retirement by renaming it. Korea's system was never enough. France fought over 2 years. China says work longer while firing people early. Nigeria kept the promise in writing while the system collapsed underneath it. 7 countries, 7 different ways to fail at the same thing. So the question becomes, has anyone actually solved this? There are indexes that rank pension systems worldwide every year. Some countries land near the top, but none of them get called finished. The OECD's average old age dependency ratio, seniors per 100 working age people, climbed from 22 in 2000 to 33 in 2025, and is projected to hit 52 by 2050. Rich or poor, nobody's dodged this bill. The promise of retirement started a century ago, in one country. No nation has ever fully kept it. Is that a disaster? Or is everyone just running their own version of a patch job? Probably both. But maybe the question itself is already outdated. For the generation entering the workforce right now, what age will you retire is becoming almost meaningless, because the premise underneath it, one job for life, is disappearing too. Next time, we take this from a different angle. A labor market where a side hustle isn't the exception anymore, it's the default. Company walls blurred by remote work, and AI, which is starting to raise a different question entirely. Not when you'll retire, but how long the job itself will exist. What replaces retirement once it's gone? That's where we go next. Which of these 7 failures does your country look closest to? Or is it breaking down in some 8th way we haven't covered? Let me know in the comments. If you found this interesting, like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Thank you.